And that sounds like we are live. Welcome back to the Mars on Life podcast. As always, I'm your host, Sebastian Chug, and with me, as always,
Ryan Mancini reporting in.
oh, because you're a journalism major. Okay, I get it. So today we decided to do something a little bit different. Retreading old ground. What's new? Not that. But
It's like
for
poetry, it rhymes.
motherfucker. So, episode 3 of this show, Mars on Life, we decided to do something a little bit different where we had an hour and a half long segment, I believe,
hmm
discussing the prequel, original, and sequel trilogy of Star Wars and just, fuddling that till we couldn't anymore. And now, on this glorious day of May 20th, if I'm not looking at the calendar, but I hope that's right. It is the 15-year anniversary of one of not only your favorite movies, but of a special guest that we have as well in this call. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Mauricio Romo. I'm currently a senior at Cal State University Northridge, good buddy to Ryan and Sebastian. And also, I would like to say Phantom Menace is one of the best Star Wars movies of all time. And I'm so excited to do this.
Thank you. It's kicking ass on Rotten Tomatoes, by the way, or I think that's Revenge of the Sith. I don't know. It beat Dark Knight, which yeah, well deserved. You see the
Well,
poll
actually,
that's been going on?
the anniversary for Revenge of the Sith was earlier. It was earlier in the week.
Right.
And it kind of surprised me just because I didn't think the anniversary of it would be acknowledged at all. But then again, last year, the 20th anniversary of Phantom Menace was, it was in the news. It was something people talked about. Yeah, Revenge of the Sith. It's quite an interesting amount of time that's passed since then. There's definitely been a lot of interesting Star Wars content that has sort of filled in the gaps, most notably and also most recently the last season of the Clone Wars.
Right. Now, I didn't get to see that. Did either of you two get to see that?
Oh, it is so good.
It's
That's pretty much
surprisingly
public
epic.
consensus, yeah.
I
Um,
mean, because I'm speaking, and Romo, I don't know about yourself, but I've seen all of Clone Wars and I think all of Star Wars Rebels as well. So it was a perfect kind of tie-in with both those shows, as
I'm
well as
currently
Revenge of the Sith.
watching Rebels. Like, I never
Okay.
started it until I finished Clone Wars. I'm like, oh, I need more. But just the thing that made Clone Wars so special is that it tied in everything.
hmm
So it bridged the gap between, because a lot of Star Wars fans had this idea of like, wait, okay, so this happened and this happened, but it never really bridged the gap. So like how Rogue One bridged the gap from Revenge of the Sith before A New Hope, like that kind of exciting. It made it exciting.
Yeah, it really did. And another cool point that I want to bring up in regards to, and this is something that you're gonna really like, Romo, is that the way, because the production of Clone Wars and Rebels were the way that they were, there's things that are revealed in Rebels that now both feel, they don't cheapen, but I guess in a way, because you're watching it in chronological order, which is cool because this means that when things happen in Rebels that tie into Clone Wars, your head's gonna explode. I mean, you're gonna be so shocked and surprised at people and characters that return and themes that you're gonna have a pretty fulfilling experience. That
Like I'm already in season 2 of Rebels, and
Ooh,
that's when it's just so good.
that's the best. That one,
mm,
I promise you, that one has a lot of tie-ins with this last season of Clone Wars.
Oh yeah,
So,
it's just so amazing.
oh, and they even steal some dialogue from Force Awakens. And I won't spoil that, but they do, and it's poignant and it's poetic. Obviously, with Revenge of the Sith, it was definitely the best received of the prequels, and I think it continues to be.
What, you didn't like Attack of the Clones?
Hey, I had the
I'm
Attack
totally
of the Clones
kidding.
Go-Gurt. And depending on which
if you
Jedi
want to,
lightsaber, you'd get blue for Ki-Adi-Mundi or green for Yoda.
as much as people would like to kind of piss up the wall about Attack of the Clones, people would say that the only redeeming part of that entire movie was everything Christopher Lee related. Okay. So I think people are just kind of failing to understand that, like, visually it was really cool, even though the story wasn't all that. Again, I could be wrong. I haven't seen the movie in like 5 years, and this is just kind of a general gloss over, but I mean, I'd rather see it than get a gun pointed at me, I guess. It's preferable.
And that's just it too with Revenge of the Sith. It's at that time it was the first Star Wars movie that was PG-13. It was very dark. There's definitely a lot of questionable things in regards to both Anakin's very quick transformation as well as just filmmaking techniques. Like, I know one complaint I heard recently about the film is that you kind of get a lead up to a character who's about to enter the scene. So, for example, having to see Anakin jump into a speeder and then park said speeder and then run through the hallways of the Galactic Senate just to get to Palpatine before Mace Windu takes him out. I don't know if I needed that necessarily. Be that as it may, there's also a lot of like focus shots on people dropping lightsabers throughout the prequel trilogy that is kind of weird. And the only time that it really, in my opinion, matters from a story standpoint is when you get that solitary shot of Anakin's saber and Obi-Wan picking it up before he leaves, because obviously, he's got to give it to Luke in the next movie. So,
Right.
But yeah, Revenge of the Sith, it's a very interesting film, but we have a different Star Wars film to talk about that's about to turn the ripe old age of 40. And it's turning 40 on the day that this episode will premiere. And that film, that Star Wars film, is, of course, The Empire Strikes Back.
Good old Empire. And
May 21st, 1980. Ronald Reagan just became president, and John Lennon was still making music. What a year. In light of everything being, for lack of a better term, depressing, and a lot of things being, obviously we've talked about it on this show about closures and basically things being as they are with the quarantine, this kind of seemed like something worth talking about just because, for a lot of people, myself included, The Empire Strikes Back is not only the best Star Wars movie, but, in my case, my favorite movie of all time. If you had to ask me between my favorite movies and the greatest movies, number one doesn't change. But it's The Empire Strikes Back is something that's made such an impact, and I'm sure it has on the two of you guys as well.
Well, this isn't my episode.
I guess, Romo, we're in kind of opening up this kind of rabbit hole about sort of The Empire Strikes Back and its impact on us. I guess, Romo, can you think of sort of what your earliest memories were watching the film?
Well, when I first saw Empire Strikes Back, I was in middle school because I grew up watching the original trilogy. Not the original trilogy, but as in the prequels. So
Okay.
I grew up watching Phantom Menace. I went from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 because I never had the privilege of seeing all the movies until one day the Spike TV in winter break decided to put all the Star Wars films. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna watch them all.
That.
The days where Spike TV, like, it was around right before New Year's Eve, the week of, from Christmas before New Year's, they just decided to play all the Star Wars films, and I've never seen Empire, and I'm just like, whoa, this is what I was missing out on. And it's just, I can see why so many people love Empire, just because the emotional impact it has.
And I
Definitely, yeah,
guess
definitely.
when it comes down to, I don't know. I mean, I guess when you saw the movie, what was the thing that kind of stood out to you the most?
The thing that I would love is the fact they portrayed Darth Vader to be like a guy on a revenge mission.
Okay.
Because here's a guy who lost everything from the Death Star, like one of his most prized possessions, the Death Star,
Mm-hmm.
just blown to pieces by by a Jedi, someone, not a Jedi, but just someone who knows the weight of the Force, and he just barely started realizing, and so he made it his entire mission to bring hell onto these people, to find those people.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a lot of ways, this is the Star Wars movie that really put Darth Vader front and center. Just because, in A New Hope, you had Peter Cushing's character, Grand Moff Tarkin, and of course, in Return of the Jedi, you had, as he referred to himself in Robot Chicken, Papa Palpatine. And, I think speaking. Hey.
Oh, that's like a fever dream memory that I had. I thought that it didn't even exist.
Oh no,
Oh,
he and it actually ties in with what Romo just said. How he says that right when Vader calls him to say, "Hey, I hate to tell you this, but the Death Star is gone," and he's like, "What? You lost? How do you destroy a battle station?"
right. It's like, what do you mean it blew up?
Yeah. And I guess Sebastian, I turn the question to you. I guess what was the thing that kind of either attracted you to, or the thing that was kind of most memorable as a kid when you watched Empire?
When I was, that's the thing. I was never really allowed to watch these types of movies when I was a kid. I guess just like even the fantasy violence was, maybe too much for my for my young eyes. And that wasn't for my parents, or should I say my dad's lack of trying to get me introduced to the films. I remember seeing one, two, and three, not understanding them, not getting the gist of them. I thought Zam Wessel turning into a fucking goblin was the creepiest shit ever in episode two.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when I got a little bit older, my dad and I sat down and we watched the original trilogy, four, five, and six together. And of course, I knew what happened. I knew that Darth Vader was Luke's father, yada yada yada. Death Star blows up, but I had no way of telling which movie was which. I just knew that it happened some point in the Star Wars universe. So when I sat down with him and watched four, I'm like, why isn't all this interesting shit happening?
Mm-hmm.
Not to say it's a bad movie. I was just, again, being a teenager, I didn't understand the whole build-up process. And then when I did see episode five specifically, it was like, okay, oh, this is where I'm supposed to gasp in awe, like this is all happening. And
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of easy to, even though I knew what was going to happen, it was easy to put myself in the theatrical audience of about 40 years ago, of hearing it for the first time, that, you know, this is the twist, this is the thing that is groundbreaking in the Star Wars universe,
Mm-hmm.
and will shape the entire Star Wars universe as this goes on throughout the end of time. So even though I knew, seeing it on screen, it was like relearning everything again. I don't know. I think that's just sort of the cult classical power that
Mm-hmm.
this movie happens to have. And I don't think I can ever really unsee that. And growing older and analyzing that scene piece by piece, it's just like, I can't say anything bad about it. I really can't. And
Mm-hmm.
that I have in other Star Wars movies in episode 3 of this show. So I don't know. Like, again, I'm not going to say that Empire Strikes Back is the perfect movie. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But would I say that it's like the perfect Star Wars movie? It's definitely up there.
Right.
And I think that public consensus agrees.
Because I know that when a lot of people will argue about what is the best Star Wars movie, and they'll typically I think in recent years you hear more of Return of the Jedi versus the other two, because for a while I think a lot of fans would argue it was between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. And for a while, that was kind of my mentality, that it's between those two. And I think, in a way, the second film really humanized these characters, but also brought life to this universe in a way that I think the first movie, wanted to do, but it wanted to do it in a safe enough way where it didn't want to alienate anyone. So, for example, things like how the Force was used, or even the alien creatures in the film, we're basically led to think that any person ever who believes in the Force could use it. What does it actually do? What are its actual abilities? We don't really know, other than, it's just kind of being a better person and kind of trusting your instincts and things like that. And when it came to the aliens, the one that we're all going to associate with and, run up to protect is Chewbacca, because he looks like a big dog, rather than somebody who's green like Greedo, or, later on in the special editions, Jabba the Hutt for that matter. So whereas Empire, it basically showed you, okay, this is the mythology of the Force. This is how Jedi and Sith use it. And what you anticipate and what you expect from heroes, including aliens, is not going to be what you expect. Because and this is something we can get out of the way, and it's something that's been said probably since 1980, which is, if Yoda didn't work, that movie doesn't work. That was something where they tapped into the mastery of Jim Henson and Frank Oz to really bring Yoda to life in a way that I think it's hard to see any other character in fiction who's digital be brought to life in that way. I mean, it'd be hard for me to think of somebody like Dobby from Harry Potter be brought to life as a puppet, especially when he's very scrawny and moving around. Whereas Yoda, he's an 800-year-old Jedi master who's, giving you instructions and being mischievous. I mean, he's one of my favorite characters in all of Star Wars, and it's kind of like, hey, he gets to shine in this movie. Like, this is Yoda's movie as much as it's Darth Vader's. And I guess if I had to kind of turn the question I asked the two of you to myself, our listeners may not know this, but I am a tad bit older than you two gentlemen. And I remember being old enough to not only have seen the original trilogy in their original forms, I guess you could say, since they were released in 77, 80, and 83, but I was also at that perfect age where the special editions had come out. And so I got to see these sort of specialized versions of these three films that were a little bit different, but at the same time, they still got everything right in terms of what George Lucas wanted with his story. And in every subsequent update of the original trilogy, Empire continues to be the one with the least amount of tweaking. And that's something I have a lot of admiration and respect for, just because when they have done that, it's further, it's improved the movie. Meaning, for example, the whole sequence with the Wampa very early on, that wasn't there in the original cut. They've edited and done as much as they can to make that whole sequence very tight and work flawlessly with the rest of the film. And I gotta say, as a kid, there was nothing scarier than the Wampa.
Yes.
I mean, I vividly remember when my family lived in Burbank, hiding behind our couch every time the Wampa head pops up on screen. It terrified me as a little kid.
It's not real, Ryan. Don't worry, Ryan.
Hey, you know what? You see that, and then you go to Disneyland and you ride the Matterhorn, You better believe those things are real.
I thought that the abominable snow the abominable is that even how you pronounce it? Anyway, the snowman that was in Snowman, the snow monster or whatever.
The Yeti.
The Yeti. Now that's in Guardians of the Galaxy, the ride. It's in a cage. So it's like another prop that's just left over. Yeah, because I guess they didn't have anywhere to put it from the Matterhorn. So they were like, oh, okay, it could just fit as another random creature in the Marvel universe. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that shaved $2 off of Disney's budget, but I mean, go ahead, Romo. This is
honestly, like, exactly how you guys were saying, like, Ryan, like, you've been saying it perfectly. Like, Yoda was seen as someone when they first brought in Yoda, everybody was like, oh, this guy, who is this guy? And then as soon as they talk about him more, everybody started to be like, oh my god, this guy is the Jedi, like the one who's supposed to be like the one who taught Obi-Wan. Even though we know Obi-Wan, he didn't teach Obi-Wan. According to Empire, it made it seem like, oh, he's the one who taught Obi-Wan how to be a Jedi, and so Yoda had all this knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, the impact that the character Yoda has currently, the cult following of memery and lampooning and just sort of comedic satirization to the point of other mediums, like most specifically the Lego games, which fucking awesome, by the way.
Oh yeah.
You kind of just have this character that envelops, you know, the traditional foil of what Ben Kenobi was in Episode 4 of the Wise Old Sage, and you even have that influence brought into, let's just now call it present media with The Mandalorian, where no matter what form you put him in, no matter what age bracket or what level of experience he may have, you're always going to remember him as one of the most powerful Jedi. You're always going to remember him as being the wisest person in the room. And dare I say, I liked him better when he was mischievous in episodes 5 and 6.
Yeah.
As opposed to 1, 2, and 3. I mean, he did look better, and he kicked the shit out of Palpatine in what was that, episode 2?
Episode 3.
Episode 3, I'm sorry. That was great.
I don't know if I'd say he looked better.
It was definitely more, you know, in the prequel trilogy, that's when they were testing out all their visual effects. Granted.
Well, they also wanted you to fight, which
exactly
you can't do with a puppet.
Yeah. So, in terms of expansion of the character, they definitely nailed that in the prequel trilogy. If you want to fucking chalk up all the things that the prequel trilogy has done wrong, you can at least give credit where credit's due and say that, you know what? They made him outside of a puppet. They made his character arc outside of a puppet.
But I think too, and I think this is a part of the appeal of a character like Yoda is, and it's something that, at least in my view, something that the prequels kind of, they don't retcon it, but they kind of backtrack in a way where in episode 5, Yoda basically makes it clear that being a Jedi is more than just, you know, size or, you know, matter or, you know, using a lightsaber.
Well, yeah, and you can
saying things like the Force, you know, the Force is your ally,
and you can make
Jedi
that same
for knowledge and defense.
You can make that same argument when Anakin wanted to attain the rank of master, and he didn't see it in him. So he knew all the requirements that needed to be fulfilled, and he obviously didn't.
Yeah,
I think
my
that
point is,
it still stays. Yeah. You know, like that aura of knowledge is still present, even from 1970 to early 2000s.
I mean, I guess my point is that as cool as an idea, because, you know, trust me, at that point in time, I was a little kid. The idea of Yoda with a lightsaber was so cool, but when you look back on it and you kind of wade through the philosophies that you get out of The Empire Strikes Back, in a weird way, it kind of contradicts the point of Yoda and the Force, just because he is so powerful and yet he has to rely on, a tool that the lesser Jedi wield with each other. And I think that's something that, it's obviously it's touchy for some people, myself being one of them, but if anything, I'm thankful, and of course, Romo, it's been a while since you and I have talked about The Last Jedi, but I'm thankful Rian Johnson brought the puppet back for when you see Yoda's spirit communicating with Luke. That moment in the movie theater, I'm never gonna forget. Now, another thing too that I feel like is definitely well worth talking about, and it's something that I think for all three of us we can agree, Empire gave us probably some of the best Star Wars music we've ever gotten, specifically with the Imperial March.
Yeah, of course. I mean, John Williams. What more do you want?
But I think too, what makes it fascinating is that, I'm trying to think about it, and it's funny because I wrote down notes about the Imperial March, where I was thinking at the time that this was the only Star Wars film with a secondary theme. With filmmaking, there's always, especially if you're in a franchise, obviously if you keep playing the same music over and over again, as cool as it is, it might, you might bore people, basically. And I know a lot of franchise films have done this, like, for example, Casino Royale did this using the song You Know My Name by Chris Cornell. That was sort of the theme song for the movie. Another example is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban with the Double Double Toil and Trouble. J.J. Abrams' for Star Trek movie uses this. And to some degree, I realize that there is another Star Wars movie that kind of uses a secondary theme, and that being the aforementioned Phantom Menace, where you do get a little bit of Duel of the Fates before they actually play Duel of the Fates. But Empire really kind of set the standard for introducing you to the Imperial March. But then John Williams does this thing where he incorporates it into every independent piece of music throughout the rest of the film, and it works, because the whole point is it's the Empire striking back. This is their theme, their anthem, and they're going to kick everyone's ass and make who it is that's kicking your ass. And they'll play, they did it in Solo and I think they do it in other Star Wars media, where the Imperial March is literally used for like Imperial recruitment videos, for like stormtroopers. It's
right.
And I, you can argue that A New Hope kind of has a secondary theme with the Force theme, but it was the first film at that time. So with Empire introducing that's the fact that John Williams took a lot of inspiration from, if you guys and as well as our listeners, this is a piece of music well worth checking out, and you'll hear the parallels. But check out Gustav Holst. There's too many S's in his last name. It's called The Planets, and this specific song is called Mars, God of War. And not only do you hear the Imperial March in there, but you hear like very Star Wars sounding music within that piece of music. It's going to blow you away. Another thing too, cinematography of this movie. Wow. I mean, 1980, and it still looks gorgeous.
It's like Sebastian was saying, and everybody else, you guys were saying, like, you vision yourself in the 80s watching this movie, and you're just like, wow. Like, I'm pretty sure if you guys seen, I'm not sure if, are you guys familiar with the TV show, that 70s show?
Oh yeah. I'm binge watching that right now. Another show I wasn't allowed to watch, but I can understand why, at least.
And so in that 70s show, even though they show the New Hope in that 70s show, it's still worth noting that when they get to the movie theater, they're not really that excited or anything. They're like, oh, this movie, I wonder how it's gonna be. And then nobody's excited. And then as soon as the movie's over, you just see their reaction to it. They're like, what did I just watch?
Yeah.
Like, oh my god. Like it's just leaving you that spectacle, like that you just left the movie theater like, oh my god, that really just happened. Like you appreciate the fact that they go through all this cinematography just to get everything done right. Like you can
You
break
leave, yeah.
down.
It's like you leave a changed person, even though, you're using the most, I don't want to say stereotypical because stereotypical often comes with negative connotation, but really stereotypical foils that have been since the dawn of time, since the dawn of theater and film. And you think, oh, how can it be done this well when this has been done countless times? Maybe it hasn't been done in the space opera format, but then again, you can look at Flash Gordon and say, well, no, that worked, and that was before. So, I mean, it still blows my mind. It really does. And, I wouldn't even consider myself a diehard Star Wars fan to the point of sobbing at the reveal trailer of one of them. And you know exactly what video I'm talking about. And look,
Oh, yeah.
I don't mean to make fun of the certain person in particular, but, there comes a point where
I thought you were talking about, all right, all right, all right.
Oh, no. This was something I brought up in episode 3 of Bars
I
on Life,
remember. Yeah.
where, when when it gets down to it, Star Wars is a franchise loved by millions upon millions, and if you want to infuse the mass consumerism of this series, and if you want to make it seem like it's your fucking livelihood to eat, breathe, and shit these movies, go right ahead. It's not my prerogative, and I can tell by this conversation that we're having that it's not ours either. We just like to watch good movies. We're not gonna fanboy over them. So,
well, and I think too we have a, I mean, and that's just it. I mean, listeners, if you want to know my full thoughts on sort of how I am with Star Wars, just go back to that last episode. Dune, baby, Dune. But worm sign. But at the same time, when it comes to Empire, it's kind of like, I'll put it this way: the themes within the film are something that, we're inundated now because we've had so many different franchise films like the Harry Potter films or Lord of the Rings, where having a hero's journey is kind of like your bread and butter with a film. But with Star Wars, and especially with Empire Strikes Back, I mean, you literally have a movie where the good guys just can't stop losing. And,
yeah.
This is a movie that would never, I mean, and that's just it. I want to say this is a movie that would never happen nowadays, but I would argue we in recent years we have gotten a movie very similar to that, and that's The Last Jedi, because in that movie the Resistance literally is wiped out to like down. It literally goes from like 400 people to like 12 people over the span of one film. And in the case of Empire, it's like, R2-D2 gets eaten by a big salamander and then spat back out. C-3PO gets shot and blown to pieces. Leia loses the love of her life. Luke loses his hand. Chewie loses his best friend and doesn't know if he's going to ever see him again. Meanwhile,
and the whole Star Wars franchise up to that point loses a strong lead. Oh.
I mean, that's just it. It's a brutal film, and
yeah.
And I think
as brutal as the critiques portray it as.
Yeah.
I'll justify it, by the way. But
oh yeah. And I think that what's smart about having that kind of a film, and in a lot of ways, and of course, The Last Jedi haters are going to further dislike me for this next statement, which is it also perfectly ties in with what Yoda says to Luke in The Last Jedi about how, failure is the greatest teacher of all. And of course, what does Yoda say when Luke pretty much gives up getting his X-Wing out of the swamp? He straight up says to him, "That is why you fail." And so, in a weird way, it set a lot of standards for Star Wars that were honestly forgotten until the right kind of people stepped into place to say, no, this is what Star Wars is about. And this is how, these are the morals of Star Wars that we have forgotten that we need to remember if we want to keep creating, more content, which of course, again, we've talked about at length, and the content, they be coming, baby. But, and one quick shout out I want to give is to Peter Sushitsky. He was the cinematographer for the film. Wherever you are, Peter, we cannot thank you enough. Just because this movie, I think I've talked about it before, that color palette in any kind of visual media is super important. And I think with Empire, it definitely highlights that in a way that I think Star Wars movies tend to forget, or at least the newer ones, the most recent 6 have in a way. Because it just seems to me that you get color associations in this movie that, at least speaking for myself, whenever I see them in person, it harkens me back to Empire Strikes Back, of all things. So, like, when I see the colors of orange and white together, it reminds me of, all of the snowspeeder pilots on Hoth. Or, that having that vibrant orange and blue coloration like you get in the carbon freeze chamber. Mm-hmm. Obviously, those are two dynamic colors that don't necessarily go together, but they trigger something within the human eye that it draws you in. And this is actually a filmmaking technique that directors like Michael Bay have used with a lot of their films to really kind of make people really get sucked into what they're seeing, even if the story itself may not be that great. But of course, by that point in the film, it's when Luke and Vader are about to have their fight, not to mention Han being put into carbon freeze. You can't deny that the color palette for the movie is exquisite.
Okay, I'll give you that one. Fine. Okay, that's one thing. One thing. Yeah, I'm kidding.
Well, hey, even the creature effects. I mean, that's another thing we can talk about.
Yes, because the creature effects in Last Jedi were so fucking phenomenal in that. What was that, like that casino city? Yeah, them running across the plane. Yeah, I want to see that 50 times.
No, Sebastian, about Empire.
Oh, I thought you were still talking about the sequel trilogy. No, yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, but if we're kind of drawing parallels here, the visual effects to a certain standpoint in 7, 8, and 9 do push the envelope in some ways. Some ways. Keyword some. In terms of Empire, though, I mean, God, it's so bleak in the beginning. And then it becomes so vibrant in Bespin that it's just like, Jesus. Like, I mean, Romo, I don't know what your take on the whole shift in scope, I guess you could say, how it feels like such a hopeless movie starting out. Hopeless in terms of, like, you put yourself in the character's shoes of, damn, I'm going to die out here in the snow, to, damn, my arm's falling down 100-meter shaft and all is lost, and everything in between. So how do you interpret that? I know Ryan asked you previously, how you first saw it or what you remember when you did first see it, but what do you think about that?
I honestly love the part that an entire film, as Ryan said earlier, that you just see them losing and losing and losing. Mm-hmm. Because in the New Hope, you just see they win. Like, oh my God, like these guys, they came out of nowhere just to destroy the Empire, and it made the Empire look weak. Like, my favorite thing to think about this movie is that you see the true might, the true power of the Empire. The reason why everybody is so scared of Vader, of everyone. Like, Vader would just, you fail him, he would just kill you on the spot.
Right.
So it's just I see it. I like to see it as a psychological and communication perspective of Vader. That's what I love seeing. I always loved Vader, no matter what. I always loved Anakin as a kid. Just seeing him and then become Vader. Just the fact that he does everything to an extent where it's like anger and power. This power, he needs power in order to be who he is, and so he's showing it off in this movie.
He brings his A game in this, like, and not just that. The Vader costume was updated, and I remember as a kid, Vader, from an appearance standpoint, looked so much more intimidating in Empire, and then in Return of the Jedi, he just looks like a big walking piece of obsidian. He's so shiny and polished, but in this, and it's one of those nuances of the film, which you got to give credit again to cinematographer, but also the director, the late great Irvin Kershner, the guy who gave us RoboCop 2. He did this thing with Vader where the way that the lighting would work on, like, reflecting off of the mask would be so terrifying at times, because depending on how the lighting appeared, it would look almost like as though Vader would have like whites in his eyes. Like it was almost like a way of giving a mask personality.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
it made him so much more terrifying. And then just to have him be on the ground in places, like the invasion of Hoth, he's literally leading the stormtroopers into the base. And we had never, after seeing the first film, we wouldn't think Vader would stoop himself so low. But in reality, this is how he is. He is that blunt instrument that the Emperor needs to rule the galaxy. And, and again, and speaking of the Emperor, this ties in with another great scene from this film, which this is the film that introduced Emperor Palpatine to everybody. Mm-hmm. Fun fact, Ian McDiarmid did not play the Emperor in this film originally. Originally, the actor's name, it was Clive Revel was the actor who played the voice of Palpatine, but it was actually a woman who was playing the body of Palpatine in that sequence where Vader communicates with him via hologram. They had gotten an actress to wear a hood, and then they superimposed chimpanzee eyes over her own to make her look more ghoulish and more kind of crusty and creepy like the Emperor is. It wasn't until 2004, while they were in the middle of filming Revenge of the Sith, that George Lucas was like, "Oh, hey, Ian, we're making the originals on DVD. You want to play the Emperor again?" And so now when you watch The Empire Strikes Back, you now have Ian McDiarmid playing Palpatine in that scene with some new dialogue, too, that ties in with the prequels. Like, he straight up says Anakin Skywalker to Darth Vader's face. And, he didn't say that back in 1980. Personally, I like having Ian McDiarmid in the film. You can't go wrong with Palpatine. Well, wait a minute. Yeah, you can.
I was going to say.
But, after rewatching it today, I have to admit, he is a little bit wooden in the scene. But at the end of the day, he does deliver some of that dialogue pretty effectively in a way that you would expect the Emperor to. And, having him thrown into the mix in this film even further builds how massive the Empire is and how much of a force for evil it is in the galaxy. The amount of things we could go over, it's immense. I mean, obviously the Battle of Hoth, we've gotten so many different battles like that with Clone Wars, with the prequels, with the sequels, that battle on Hoth was epic. I mean, that was the first time where we figured, well, in A New Hope, they had all these X-Wings against this big battle station. Oh, they won. Oh, they got a bunch of speeders flying against a bunch of robotic camels. Oh, they'll win. They get hammered. I mean, they get wiped out by the same Nazi who tried to drink from the fake Holy Grail in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, And fun fact, the Imperial officer, Admiral Ozzel, he's the guy that Vader force chokes through his TV. That same actor played Hitler in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Right.
Which means whenever somebody asks you, how did Hitler die, you just tell them Darth Vader choked him out with the Force. Yeah, I went there. But, you know, it's... And he's got the same mustache, too. I'm just saying. But on top of that, you know, this movie, you know, and this I want to open up to you guys as well, is what this movie does in terms of opening up what the Force is like and what the Force really is. Because obviously with A New Hope, we had this idea that, oh, you know, well, you know, anybody can be a Jedi or anybody can believe in the Force. But in this, you know, you start getting like the telekinesis and the, you know, lifting objects, the mental communication, I guess you could call it, between characters like, you know, like Luke and Vader, or even Luke reaching out to Leia at the very end of the film. Now, I'm curious, when you guys saw Empire Strikes Back for the first time, if you can remember that far back, because I, you know, full disclosure, first time I saw these three movies, I was 2 years old, so I can't remember that far back. But when you first saw that scene where Luke reaches out to Leia, did you ever think that that was their way of subtly hinting that she was Force sensitive too? Or did you see it as Luke is successful in using the Force to reach out to Leia to basically help him from falling to his death?
I feel like those can't be interdependent of one another, because even if Luke were to realize that he has the Force, not only that, but the Force actually exists within him and it works. Mm-hmm. If Leia didn't know to drive the Millennium Falcon to go pick him up at the end of Episode 5, how would that not have conveyed to the audience that she wasn't as well Force sensitive? Now, you can also make this argument more solid by the conversation they have in Episode 6, where Luke says to Leia, you know, in time, it'll come within you as well, or something like that. Seeing Episode 5, seeing her realize that, having the conversation in Episode 6, and then having the fucking Force jump or Force travel through space.
The Mary Poppins scene, as it's called.
In Episode 8. It's like, I'm looking at this and I'm like, you know, I remember the fucking Lego Princess Leia Jedi figure. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'll admit I was a bit spoiled, but even though I didn't understand what canon meant in any sense of the word, I knew that something was up. I always expected her as the woman with buns in her hair and a white dress, and that's all I saw her as a kid, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't think she was Force sensitive. Apparently she is, because otherwise, you know, you can't really ask Lucas this, because, you know, it's just, are they trying to hint at something EU related, extended universe related? Yeah, probably. You know, was it cool to see in 5 and 6 that, you know, the power exists from within? Yeah, it was. It was cool that it was hinted at least. The execution in 8 was god awful. It was so hokey. Okay, Ryan,
I'm mixed about it.
You can't take a film's stance and say that it was even the opportune moment to do so. Yeah, the fucking base gets blown up. If Leia would have died right then and there, I felt it would have been a lot more dramatic, lent more to the story.
I agreed. I remember seeing that sequence in the theater, and I genuinely thought, oh my goodness, this is how they're going to get rid of Leia? I mean, it was kind of brutal in the theater, and then of course realizing that
and it was kind of brutal.
Dead.
It was kind of brutal in the theater when Kylo Ren stabbed his own father on the bridge.
Oh yeah, oh no doubt. But I think when I throw that, or I guess what I mean by that is, if you're only isolating, you know, Episode 4 because that's the movie that started it all, and Empire, because that was something I thought about when I was rewatching the film earlier. is that, by that point in time, and in a lot of ways, this kind of goes to our discussion about the sequel trilogy and how, clearly not having a through storyline for all three films didn't do the sequel trilogy a lot of good in the end. But at the same time, that's what made the original trilogy so great, because by the time Empire was in development, there were absolutely no plans for Leia to be either Force sensitive nor Luke's sister. And so, when Yoda says there is another, he's not talking. Well, obviously, in canon, he's talking about Leia. But at that point in time, he said that, and audiences were like, "Wait, what? Who?" And it wasn't until they were developing Return of the Jedi, they actually did have an idea of creating a whole new character to be, this other, or even this other Skywalker. And it wasn't until the story was getting tossed around so much that they just landed it on Leia and said, let's just have it be Leia. But then, of course, it begs the question of, well, why couldn't Vader sense that Leia was Force sensitive? And also the probably the only flaw with the movie, which is when Leia kisses Luke in Echo Base after he's saved from the Wampa by. Well, he's not saved from he's saved from the snowstorm by Han. Anyway, I guess that was kind of my.
We can definitely split hairs all day about whether or not the direction to, I guess you could say, theatricize Leia's Force Awakening. Oh, nice pun there.
You see what you did there?
Yeah, you did. God. Yeah, I like what they do. I like what they do to extend the Star Wars universe, as stated in, again, sound like a broken record here, episode 3 of Mars on Life. Okay, and I classify anything EU related, and as someone who grew up playing Force Unleashed, 10 out of 10 first of all, about a solid 8 out of 10 on the second one. I don't know. As someone who grew up playing a lot of EU content, because there really wasn't a lot of EU content to watch. You had the 6 films, that's about it. Okay. You had your standalone video games like Force Unleashed, Jedi Outcast, fucking Jar Jar Binks Bingo, that last one. But you had some
like to play.
Yeah.
Oh God.
you had some really standalone titles that it was like, okay, I like the direction that this is going. Mm-hmm. I like the fact that I can sit in the theater as a young 20-something and still enjoy Rogue One, a movie that I didn't even expect to like. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you for a fact, as someone who's never seen Solo, I like it better than Solo.
Yeah, Rogue One is better than Solo in my opinion. I don't know, Romo, what you think about.
Yeah. The thing about Rogue One is I honestly love Rogue One. Like it was just perfect. The thing about I grew up with a family who doesn't like Star Wars, and so my sister went to go see Rogue One, knowing like she had never seen Star Wars at all, and she actually enjoyed that movie. And she told me, yeah, I actually liked it, and I'm just like, what? Like I was shocked in disbelief the fact that she would like a Star Wars movie, yet alone like just how good impact Rogue One was. But that's getting a little bit off topic. But
yeah, it could get away with being a standalone movie and it would still be excellent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
just the fact that it tied into Episode 4 flawlessly, might I add. Mm-hmm. That just kind of sealed the deal of, okay, there is a market for content outside of the now 9 films. What can we do to expand it? And then they don't expand it. Okay. You have all this media from 3+ decades, and you don't see anything done with it. And that's the biggest slap in the face, because there clearly is an audience for this kind of stuff. Okay. Right. What Empire Strikes Back perfects can be done, I feel personally, to this ignored fan base material. Okay, I would have
Mm.
loved, I would love to see them go kind of the Mortal Kombat route and go into detail about each and every single nuanced character and nuanced again. I mean that as no, in no way, negative connotation, but
Yeah.
every single detail where it's like, this is interesting, and they do it in the Star Wars official dictionary. But wouldn't you like to at least see that in some sort of TV or film? And yeah, you can make the argument Clone Wars and Rebels and The Mandalorian and all this stuff coming out now.
There's
I
going
don't
to be a
know.
Cassian Andor show, so for all the Rogue One fans, get ready for more Diego Luna.
I don't know. I just, when you see Empire, you wish that there was more of that kind of holy trinity of, what makes this movie good into other subjects of Star Wars that aren't expanded upon, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's just kind of, it feels a little bit like betrayal, in my
It
opinion.
it's funny you say that because I actually heard someone say almost the exact same thing in a video regarding the 15th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith, which is something that all Star Wars material outside of the original trilogy. So we're talking the sequels, the prequels, video games, books, every bit of content out there you can think of, other than maybe something like, well, even that's just it. Even Rogue One counts. It's just that every other bit of content is trying to either reach that echelon where the original trilogy sits, or everything harkens back to the original trilogy. And even within time periods that don't coincide, i.e., the prequels and the sequels, there's always this way of, well, we know what you really like. And so they harken back to something from the original trilogy. And, that's just it. Sometimes fan service can be a lot of fun. In The Last Jedi, I love it when R2-D2 shows the old hologram of Leia asking Obi-Wan for help. When Luke tells R2-D2, nothing's going to change my mind about leaving this planet. And then R2 starts that video and Luke's like, well, that was a cheap move. Like that's creative in a story standpoint. But then when you get to like pandering and recalling things, it begs the question of, do I want to jump back and just watch that old trilogy, or do I want to keep going with this new material that wants me to remember said original trilogy? And I think, capturing Empire, that movie is the definition of lightning in a bottle, frankly. It's something that the powers that be between George Lucas, Irvin Kershner, and we can't forget Lawrence Kasdan and Lee Brackett. This was the first Star Wars movie written that had a female screenwriter. Lee Brackett, along with Lawrence Kasdan, they created something that it transcended what Star Wars did. Star Wars was intended to be more like an indie space opera western, but Empire, not only did it dabble into all this different mythology and even film mythology, but it did it in such a way that you really felt like you were expanding the universe. And that's something that any film can have problems with. But this movie did it in such a way where it's acting like as if you know this universe already, you know these characters. Thus, when we show you something, you're going to be freaked out, but you have to expect it as part of the universe, whether it's Yoda or whether it's the big space slug that the Millennium Falcon flies into and then flies back out of. That whole scene, by the way, like out of context, that whole sequence could be so cheap, and yet you watch it within the context of a Star Wars film with the wonderful music of John Williams, and you just expect it as another oddity in space. To borrow a song title from David Bowie, like it's just another space oddity that you could potentially fly past and potentially get swallowed up by. And I guess too, to your point, Sebastian, that's something that I kind of noticed as well with Vader towards the end of this film, because obviously I think we can all agree we love the hallway scene with Vader in Rogue One, right?
Oh yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
A lot of people like to say, oh, well, I wish we got that in the original trilogy, or oh, I wish we got that in the prequels. Well, prequels is said and done. The original trilogy, however, I would argue we did get a taste of that towards the third. You know, I always looked at this specific lightsaber duel as being in 3 parts, because it starts out in the carbon freeze chamber, and then it's in whatever weird hallway that they find themselves in, and then finally when they're on the big wind vane thing. And it's at that third part right before Luke gets his hand chopped off. Like, I remember watching it, and this is going to sound really weird, and Sebastian, you're going to call me like a hypocrite or something when I say this, but watching Vader hammer his lightsaber into Luke's lightsaber, I'm not kidding, I was channeling Palpatine from episode 3 when Anakin's fighting Count Dooku. Like, I was sitting there going, oh, yeah, oh. Like, I genuinely was like, I would hate to have this hulking, robotic source of evil just slam this giant red light beam at me, and I literally have nowhere else to go but down. Just thinking about it just gave me a chill down my spine.
The thing that also makes me pretty exciting about the fight scene, Ryan, is that if you notice when Darth Vader is fighting, he's fighting with the skill of just using one hand.
Yeah.
Normally, as a lightsaber duel, you want to have 2 that we firmly grab. Here you have Vader, who haven't really had a scene of, you saw him using a lightsaber against Obi-Wan. Yeah, it's a nice double saber, but here you have him where he has more mechanics, and he's just using one hand. Yet Luke is struggling to use 2 hands with his lightsaber, and you just see Vader just laying down the hammer.
Yeah, and within the context of that time period when they filmed those movies, and you can find video of Mark Hamill talking about this. When he was explained how he should hold a lightsaber, he was basically told, this thing is heavy. You know, you need 2 hands to carry something like this. And so that was kind of the mentality he had in the way he would hold a lightsaber, and why a lot of Luke's poses with a lightsaber look the way they do. And of course, with Vader, you know, we had no idea how robotic he was, or I guess more appropriately, how much of a cyborg he was. And to some degree, that him using a lightsaber, which is supposed to be very heavy, according to Mark Hamill, and he's using it with one hand, that should tell you something about the inhumanity of this villain. For you, Romo, you talked about your experience and getting to see these movies in the order that George Lucas intended. When it came to the reveal of Darth Vader as Luke's father, I guess, what do you remember what that reaction was like?
Well, here's the thing. So before I saw Star Wars, I was a big Nickelodeon fan, so I used to love The Fairly Odd Parents. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not sure if you know where I'm bringing this up to, but there was a scene I believe called Abracatastrophe, the movie, where it's Timmy Turner. Anyway, There's a scene where they show Timmy Turner fighting Darth Vader.
Oh, yeah.
I think I've seen this, yeah.
Back when it wasn't garbage.
Yeah. And so he says, "No, Timmy, I am your father." And I'm just like, I always realized, I was like, oh, it's from Star Wars. Like, I kind of figured, because I knew, like, I never seen Star Wars, I mean, as in the old trilogy. I never saw that, but like, oh, that's just the point, like, oh, I am your father, and then everybody saying, no, I am your father, I am your father. And so watching it for the first time, and then realizing that Darth Vader doesn't actually say, I am your father.
No, yeah.
It's just like mind-blowing to me. I'm just like, here we have it.
Yeah, no, I mean, you have so many mediums lampooning that one statement, right?
Yeah.
And I
Toy
think
Story 2 does it great.
Toy Story 2 does it great. I still think that the Lego Star Wars video game does it the best, where, as you know, the characters, they don't even say anything. They don't talk using dialogue.
Oh, yeah,
so
I know.
In the scene, instead of saying, Luke, I am your father, Darth Vader just holds up a picture of himself as Anakin and Padme to Luke, and Luke's just like, huh, and then falls off the ledge because he's in such disbelief.
Well, and let's not forget how it should have ended and how they treated that, where it's during the transmission or communication between the Emperor and Vader, and the Emperor says, I have no doubt this boy is the offspring of Anakin Skywalker. And Vader's just like, wait, what? And then he's like, I have a son? And then he just starts running around the Star Destroyer saying, guys, I'm a dad. I have a kid. and then, like, he even says it to lightspeed. Like, the Star Destroyer they're in goes into lightspeed, and he's like, hey, lightspeed, And it's the goofy nature of it, but then also, like, the fact that while they were filming that, the only people that knew that Vader was Luke's father, the only people that knew were George Lucas, Irvin Kershner, and Mark Hamill, and also to an extent James Earl Jones as well. And it was like a moment of total disbelief among everybody. Like, when you read the script at that time, Mark Hamill would say, he's done interviews where he's talked about how when he read the script for that particular scene, it reads Obi-Wan, you don't know the truth, Obi-Wan killed your father. Meanwhile, James Earl Jones, when he got his copy of the script, it says, Vader, it says, no, I am your father. And James Earl Jones's immediate response was, he's lying. How's he going to get this lie out, And according to Irvin Kershner, when he told Mark Hamill, he walked up to him and said, okay, so Darth Vader's your father, right? And Mark Hamill just goes, huh? This is the kind of, like, movie secrecy that I love hearing, not just as a journalist, but also just as a film connoisseur, if you will. The fact that this took the villain of the film, who's already iconic, and he's already got a pimped out upgrade in his costume, and he's kicking this kid's ass in a lightsaber fight, and then he just puts the cherry on top after he takes this kid's manhood away by getting rid of his lightsaber in his right hand, and then tells him, he just drops this bomb on him that, no, actually, I'm your dad. I guess in a weird way, for me growing up, it was strange because I always knew that scene was coming, but when the scene actually happens, I still filled with that sense of dread that, oh my goodness, this is real, this is the truth. Like, as a kid, you're watching this and you're thinking, it's just Vader and Luke and they're against each other, but now there's a family element. And it really turns it on its head. And I guess, this kind of ties back in with our earlier discussion about Revenge of the Sith, which is, and I want to ask you guys this, which is, do you think the ending of Revenge of the Sith would have been more effective had you not seen Anakin become Darth Vader? Like, he goes down the path of evil, but you don't actually see him either be called Darth Vader nor put on the suit.
I remember this argument surfacing in a lot of pre-internet debates of, when message boards were pretty much the only way to kind of share public opinion. And in a lot of ways, it's still like that.
Mm-hmm.
When the NEETs behind their computer monitors over at Reddit aren't talking about this, it's sort of the thing that kind of makes me think that, had I not seen Darth Vader at the end of Revenge of the Sith, would it have mattered? The guy says one line in the chair, aside from, is Padme all right? And it's just no, So
yep.
I really don't think that you need that scene to hammer home the fact that he's lost everything, and he now realizes that. And it isn't until episode 6 that he realizes that, he can say it to his son's face and say, "Hey, I kind of fucked up, but that doesn't mean you have to." So, if you would have, and I still argue this to this day, if you would have left him, burning on Mustafar, not saying that he has to die, Anakin, but if you would have left out the whole, if you would have kept it ambiguous, say you don't know that Palpatine found him, okay, you don't know that he got rebuilt and this, that, and the other thing, and the transition from 3 to 4 is flawless in that you don't know who Darth Vader is.
Yeah.
Maybe then any better.
Maybe then it would have been more powerful. I think the fact that the father-son dynamic existing is powerful on its own. I think every boy in some way tries to emulate their father, regardless of whether he's a good person or a bad person. And that's not even speaking from that's not even speaking from film. That's just speaking from real life.
Right. Well, and Luke even has that moment in Return of the Jedi. After he strikes Vader down, he looks at his hand, and then he looks at Vader's mechanical stump. And I was thinking about this too. Just imagine if it was the opposite. Imagine if Return of the Jedi ended where Vader got the upper hand in the lightsaber duel, takes off Luke's mechanical hand, and then looks at his own mechanical hand and realizes, my kid's going down the same road I am. I ain't going to let this happen. Now, granted, that could have led to a whole different ending.
Well, see, that's the thing, though. But no, actually, I feel like it would have led to the same conclusion, because in realizing that both people are now turning into the same negative entity, and realizing that there is still some good left in Vader, as there was some, should we say, bad existing within Luke, because at the end of episode 6, it was, hinted that, oh, this one has great power to join the Sith, as Palpatine.
Your hate has made you powerful. Yeah.
It still doesn't change the fact that Vader tossed him over the edge. So the care still exists, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Romo, what's your thought on the reveal, and if Revenge of the Sith should have been more mum's the word on who Vader really was?
Well, the thing that I like about Revenge of the Sith is that, as you guys touched earlier, that Vader lost everything. So that's where he touches into anger. And so in Empire Strikes Back, that's where you see his anger at its peak form. You see him as a badass, just a guy who's like, I'm gonna do what I need to do to get to accomplish the goal that I need. And so when he's delivering that emotional presence, you can't help to think, but it's just like, here is Anakin Skywalker. When Emperor Palpatine said that, oh, he's the son of Anakin Skywalker, you're like, wait a minute. That's when I personally think that's when, okay, maybe Vader, like, it hit him close to heart, because here he was told that all his kids died when Padme died. And yet, here's where you find out, oh, wait, I have a son? Like, it's just like, okay, like, I have a son, but I'm still going to kick his ass. Because, like, I need to defend my empire. Because at this point, for Vader, the most important thing to him is his legacy and his empire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at this.
Yeah, continue. What were you going to say, Beth?
I mean, you can look at the Sith code verbatim, and it clearly reads, "Peace is a lie. There's only passion. Through passion I gain strength. Through strength I gain power. Through power I gain victory. Through victory my chains are broken, and the Force shall free me." Right. Mm-hmm. So when I look at Darth Vader, when I look at Kylo Ren in 7, 8, and 9, and I wish I don't, because in terms of who's the better villain, there's no contest.
Right.
When I look at the Sith, I look at the path to redemption that exists within these characters, at least some of them. For Palpatine, he played the Machiavellian stance since episode 1, and he did it flawlessly. Okay.
Well.
Okay. Well, all right. Look.
Let's not talk about Rise of Skywalker.
All right. No, oh, no, 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 no. I'm not. Oh, you do not want to talk about Rise of Skywalker with me, my friend. I will dig that one a new one.
Wait, did you
Okay.
already see it? Did you see it
No,
finally?
no, I won't.
Ah, okay.
I
Well,
won't. I'm sorry.
anyway, revisit episode 3 for that. Our episode 3 for that one.
I'm only talking about Ian McDiarmid's 1 through 3.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, I feel that he played that role beautifully in, playing both sides of the aisle until eventually settling on
Like
a
a good
villain.
politician.
Exactly. Oh, herder.
Let me be clear. We got to get this Galactic Senate to not be shellacked by the Separatists.
I think this is why a lot of people think that the Sith is just the more interesting path to go on. In Knights of the Old Republic, it definitely was the Sith. Fuck the Jedi path. Okay, that was
always
boring. So you look at these characters and you're just like, okay, there's some redemption and there's some redeeming qualities. There's some humanity within them. And the transition not from good to evil, but from evil to good is, I think I think Star Wars, I'm not saying it may have began this whole, counter shift, but it was definitely one of the first movies that made me realize that there is some good left in people that otherwise wouldn't appear at first glance. You're not going to look at Darth Vader crashing through Episode 4's walls and think, oh, that's a good guy.
Right.
That was the one who was supposed to restore balance of the Force, not restore balance to the Order, not join it. Whatever.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan.
Well, and that's the interesting thing too now with Revenge of the Sith leading into A New Hope, or at least the way that George Lucas envisioned it back in 2005, is that when you do have that transition, you're watching it and his thought process was, okay, you've been through this journey with Anakin, because obviously when George Lucas was running things at Lucasfilm and there was only 6 Star Wars films, he changed it from being about, Luke the adventures of Luke Skywalker and the redemption of Darth Vader. He turned it into, this is a 6-chapter saga about one individual, that being Anakin Skywalker. And so the way he envisioned it, jumping from 3 to 4, is you've seen the consequences of all of Anakin's actions manifest into this Dark Lord of the Sith. And then as Episode 4 begins, his idea was you watch Vader appear on screen and your brain immediately thinks, oh no, poor Anakin, he's still in the suit. Which, I mean, I'll admit that was something that would cross my mind as a kid. I've seen other content creators, YouTubers, whoever, that have made their own kind of fan fiction as to basically readapting Revenge of the Sith so that it ends in a ambiguous way as to, you think Anakin is dead, Obi-Wan thinks Anakin is dead, and on top of that, I've even seen some people take it in a direction where you don't even know what Padme's fate is, so that it more better lines up with what Leia says in Return of the Jedi. And so thus, when you watch the original trilogy, it does feel fresh and it does feel new, because, if you're a little kid and you're watching all 6 of these first 6 films, you're not going to go into Episode 5 thinking, or even Episode 4 for that matter, thinking that Anakin and Vader are the same person. Now, obviously, in hindsight, which I'm realizing I'm saying that a lot this year, hindsight in 2020, Sebastian, help me make it stop. Romo too, please save me. But in hindsight, if you're somebody who started out with the original trilogy, but then you watch the prequels, I mean, obviously you're going to know, no matter what, Anakin and Vader are the same person. I think it's just the literal nature of it that I think they maybe could have avoided with the end of episode 3 and not have been, because obviously with episode 3, why was the marketing so successful for episode 3? They slapped Darth Vader on everything. I mean, the action figures, all the packaging for, clothing, toys, you name it, Darth Vader's mug was on it. And that was
even
something
the trailer.
that really...
The very first trailer
he's in
they
the trailer.
released, they focused on, oh, this is how it legit says, you've been wanting to find out how he becomes Darth Vader. Well, voila, this is how he exactly becomes the guy that everybody loves.
Yeah, and I think, obviously from a marketing standpoint, and, I'll admit, as a kid, that was the coolest thing in the world, because I never thought I would get Darth Vader in a Star Wars movie that came out within my lifetime. And now I've been spoiled, and I've gotten 2, arguably more because of, how far are you in Rebels, Romo?
I am at the point where Vader is just, he's at the point where, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna do this myself. Where he just starts going all the way and like handling the business. They just met the clones, added the clones.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. And so now, and the Ahsoka is just like, and Ahsoka also realized, oh, that Vader.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's.
I haven't seen the Ahsoka battle with Vader yet, but I'm very excited for that.
Get ready, and again, there's some dialogue in that sequence that's stolen right out of Force Awakens that I think you'll appreciate. Yeah, I mean, that's just it. Is I got spoiled with Darth Vader, not only in 2 movies but also in a TV show. This episode has been mostly about Empire, but in a way, this is how Revenge of the Sith and its marketing ties perfectly in with Empire, because every bit of marketing for The Empire Strikes Back heavily featured Darth Vader. Like, he was the selling point of the film. So much so that, the teaser poster for The Empire Strikes Back was literally just the blackness of space and then a silhouette, not silhouette, but a faded image of Vader's helmet. And even the trailers back then, some of them were a little cheesy. There were some trailers where literally it was just nothing but concept art, and then a bunch of candids of all the actors in their costumes. Sebastian, I'm going to show you that trailer, and my friend, you're going to have a field day with it, because it's not the kind of, for a movie like that, it's not the kind of trailer I'd be showing these days. But then again, the art of making trailers is very different now than it is back then. I think in a lot of ways, and I guess this is kind of a perfect way to wrap it up and kind of tie it back in with Mars on Life. Would you guys think that this may be the most artistic Star Wars film, or am I reaching and I have to explain myself?
No, I don't think. So, sorry, Romo, but short answer, yes. In a lot of ways, yes. But go ahead, Romo.
Well, it's to an extent of how you want artistic.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, like, I love the action sequence, so I always felt that Revenge of the Sith was the most artistic, just because they use CGI, but to an extent, and they heavily focus on action in it. And at the same time, like, they use the way they portrayed it very. I felt Revenge of the Sith, but close second is Empire. For me.
Okay. In a lot of ways, there's just too much of it that it's iconic, and it's the kind of thing. It's the kinds of things that when you, like, if you see a screenshot out of Empire, you can immediately identify it as, oh, that's an epic moment from a Star Wars movie. Whether it's that quick moment where Luke and Vader sort of pause right before they start their lightsaber duel. I guess to me, it's something that. It just takes a lot of those very elemental mythologies, I guess you could say, of the Star Wars franchise, and it really expands on them in a way that feels very down to earth, but also at the same time, it feels very, very much like it's in a galaxy far, far away. And I guess the final note that I'll add is it's hard to beat Yoda's philosophy of do or do not, there is no try. As hokey as I sound in the depths of podcasting.
Well spoken. No, very well spoken.
That phrase I should recognize as one of the most important phrases that Yoda ever says, just because everybody uses it.
Right. I mean, it was my, I think when I was in 6th grade and we had all of our baby pictures in our yearbooks because we were graduating elementary school, that was the quote my parents chose. And they kept it a secret from me, too, by the way. Obviously, in Revenge of the Sith, you have that very contradictory line that Obi-Wan gives of only a Sith deals in absolute. And I mean...
No, they don't.
Because
they can cross back, and I'm going to argue that to the day that I die, only a Sith deals in absolutes. It's like, you know what? Yeah. Let's not forget. That's fucking life, okay? You have your series of grays, but everything is either a 1 or a 0, all right? Now, if the Jedi are too ignorant to believe the fact that, what you do or don't do is going to not have consequences or have consequences, then... I'm sorry. That's why I don't follow the Jedi code in literally any form of Star Wars medium.
That's why, if you guys don't know, I'm going to bring back a Phantom Menace. Qui-Gon was very against the Jedi code. As in, he started...
Well, he was taught by Dooku.
Dooku wasn't a Sith yet by that point.
Exactly. Dooku wasn't a Sith yet. So you can draw the parallels between what he learned as a Padawan, most likely, and the realization of, oh, my master turned. Okay, so now I have to look at this from an objective frame of view where, I can truly be independent in how I teach and how I interpret the Force. And how he interpreted it was the very scientific way of doing so, which everyone likes to rave over of, oh, yeah, well, that gets rid of the mysticism. It's like, okay, it gets rid of the mysticism, so what? If you're going to interpret something differently and then be mad at this different interpretation, it's not very tolerant of you as a Star Wars fan, is it? That's my 2 cents.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, there's 2 things that you can use to kind of contradict Obi-Wan's statement, which is Vader and this is a perfect way to tie it back with Empire, which is that, if a Sith only deals in absolute, why does Vader keep altering the deal with Lando about where, what happens with Leia and Chewbacca after Han Solo gets sent to Tatooine with Boba Fett?
Mm-hmm.
He says it straight up. I'm altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further. And on top of that, I like to think that Obi-Wan is taunting Anakin, because if you notice in Episode 4, he does it too. He does it to him as Darth Vader. When Vader says, now I'm the master, and Obi-Wan straight up goes, only a master of evil, Darth. Like, it's his way of basically telling him, oh yeah? Well, you're stupid. Except he's saying it like a Jedi. And I think, maybe I'm overanalyzing, and maybe I'm trying to find hidden meaning in Obi-Wan saying something that, again, people have pointed out contradicts Yoda's line, but it the line itself is something that I think I'm just kind of amazed to see how a line like that, as a kid, that line was just like, oh, it's just Yoda catchphrase. Ooh. But to see that become so part of the pop culture, at least in my book, I put it as one of the top film quotes of all time, shortly followed by, just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. Which I'm sure all of our friends that heard me say that are now grabbing their pitchforks and violating quarantine to come after me.
On my way.
So on that note, this was a unique episode. Obviously with circumstances being as they are, and I kind of looked at this as something that we couldn't pass up. Not just because of how much the movie has meant to myself, but obviously to you guys as well. And in a hokey way, I may be a very different I may have become a very different person without this movie. You know, it's my fascination with space and the cosmos may not have existed without movies like The Empire Strikes Back.
Yep.
So we're gonna wrap things up. We did go kind of long on this. So Romo, thank you so very, 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 very much for coming on the show.
Thank you guys.
You know, as much as I crap on the prequels, I can't express how fascinating it was to get your take, just kind of based off of how you've consumed these movies. And, you know, it's something that is always fascinating to listen to when it comes to especially newer Star Wars fans that, you know, their first exposure to Star Wars was the prequels or the Clone Wars or the sequel trilogy even, or Rebels. And I think, you know, for us fans that aren't jaded or feel like all hope is lost, I might be speaking for myself. It's still a very enlightening and inspiring thing that, you know, I take to heart, and I love hearing it. So, you know, thank you, and, you know, we'll definitely bring you back if we have another hot Star Wars take.
And you know what's crazy, Ryan? There was so much more we could talk about just about Empire.
Oh, no, I know we're not done. That's why I was dreading this episode since episode 3.
Well, one thing I really noticed is that for a Star Wars film, they really emphasize on the sexual tension between Leia and Han Solo.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you just, right at the beginning of the film, you just felt it where Han was just, like, trying to bait Leia, and Leia was just trying to play innocent, but just, like, playing to his trap. And there's another thing where you pretty much just see how, in a way, like, you see how Luke is starting, when he goes to Dagobah and everything's going bad for him, and he's like, oh, I'm trying to find Yoda, yet this guy doesn't come out, and yet why is this furry monster coming out here when bothering me when I need to find Yoda? And then when he finds out he's Yoda, he completely changes his perspective. The fact that he found out that, oh, I have been disrespecting this elder who's supposed to teach me the ways of how it should be. That's not the way I should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh no, that's one of those film switcheroos that it's so fascinating to watch it, but then it's also you realize how severe the situation is once you realize this is Yoda, and, you know, he has to find some way of teaching this grown ass man how to be a Jedi when he's missed out on what he should have gotten, which was 22 years of training.
Yeah, no, I was just also thinking about it, like how you were saying how those 23 years of training, he would have survived, hopefully, but at the same time, the way that we're hunting down Jedi, it was just, Star Wars Rebel touches that a lot, how Jedis are just getting decimated left and right, but that's another topic. But another thing about Empire, they really emphasize on the side characters.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's like, yes, Star Wars is a base about these guys, like Han Solo and this and that, but it also gave you a little bit of a backstory of R2. It gave you some C-3PO, Chewbacca even. Like, you felt their emotional perspective.
Yeah, this movie really fleshed them out in a way that I think if we didn't already love them from A New Hope, this was the movie that gave us a moment of pause to really fall in love with those characters all over again. Empire, it's so multi-layered and so multifaceted that, you know, trying to get it within a short couple hours is not easy. But yeah, we could go on a whole another episode just talking about every minute detail of the film. Mauricio, we appreciate it so much having you on. Is there anything that you want to give any particular shout out to before we wrap things up?
I mean, you can just, for all the people listening to, that you guys can follow me on Instagram. My name is Bromo96, BRMOOO 3 O's 96. And just to see I'm a big Star Wars nerd. I love going to conventions and stuff like that. So just everything, anything, stuff in between. It's been a pleasure just being on this show. Thank you guys.
Of course.
Yeah, man, we appreciate it. And then, what's your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is RomoTron96, ROMOTRON 96.
Awesome.
I love
Yeah,
that.
no, we'll make sure that we'll have it in the description for the episode as well, just in case. Sebastian, are you recovered to provide your?
Yeah, no,
Your
I'm fine.
socials?
I'm organizing it. I'm now realizing just how much little work I have to do. You know, I write for a living, so if it's one thing I know, it's bullshit. So when it comes to my handles, you can follow me at Dr. Sebi on Instagram. That's at DRSEBBY. Also, if you feel inclined to breach the no man's land, that is Twitter, you can go follow me at dr_SEBBY. There I post various musings, or I used to. I'm currently taking a little break because, as I said, it makes me question my sanity in the world. You can also find me on YouTube as well under the addicum of Seabass. That's SEABASS, like the fish. I post various narrations there, as well as on a separate podcasting account under the name of Shugsy's Storytime. That's where I have my archives. Feel free to look me up on Google as well. Sebastian Shug Publishing. Send me a manuscript. Quarantine has got us all bored. Finally, why don't you go ahead and end things off, Ryan?
So, when I'm not deliberating sending letters to the editor to newspapers that I have prior affiliations with, or when I'm not reading Michael Crichton's The Andromeda Strain, you can find me on Instagram at Mancini Ryan. Slowly losing my mind because we're actually getting the Snyder Cut. And as for Twitter, that could be a whole nother episode too about the Snyder Cut. On Twitter, you can find me at Mancini Ryan. There I'm sharing, or rather I'm retweeting from people that are reminiscing on when times were precedented and not unprecedented like every damn day is. And with that, Romo, I just want to say, very heartfelt from Sebastian and I, welcome to Mars.
Welcome
Thank you.
to Mars.
It's been an honor.
You've been listening to Mars on Life. Please make sure that you find us over on social media at Mars on Life Show on both Twitter and on Instagram. And on top of that, you can find this show on Anchor, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Our artwork is done by Zachary Erbrick, and our intro music is Space Explorers by Kevin MacLeod. I've been Ryan Mancini. My co-host, as always, is Sebastian Shug. And just remember, if you keep on going, you'll make it to Mars.